Evelyn stood at the edge of the crowded ballroom, her emerald green gown shimmering under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. She sipped champagne slowly, observing the swirling couples on the dance floor with a mixture of envy and disdain. At 28, she was tired of these high society gatherings, full of fake smiles and hollow conversations. But as the daughter of a prominent businessman, attendance was expected. Her gaze drifted across the room, landing on a tall, dark-haired man she'd never seen before. He stood out from the sea of tuxedos, his presence commanding attention without effort. As if sensing her stare, he turned, locking eyes with Evelyn. The intensity of his gaze sent a shiver down her spine. Before she could look away, he was moving towards her with purposeful strides. Evelyn's heart raced as he approached, a slight smile playing on his lips. "I don't believe we've met," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I'm Alexander." "Evelyn," she replied, surprised at how breathless she sounded. "I don't recall seeing you at these events before." Alexander's smile widened. "I'm not usually one for parties, but I'm glad I made an exception tonight." There was something in the way he looked at her that made Evelyn feel exposed, as if he could see right through her carefully constructed facade. It was both thrilling and terrifying. "Would you care to dance?" Alexander asked, extending his hand. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, before placing her hand in his. As he led her to the dance floor, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change irrevocably. They moved together seamlessly, as if they'd been dancing partners for years. Alexander's hand on her waist sent sparks through her body, and Evelyn found herself getting lost in the depths of his dark eyes. "Tell me, Evelyn," Alexander said softly, "are you enjoying yourself tonight?" She considered lying, giving the polite answer expected of her. But something about Alexander made her want to be honest. "Not particularly," she admitted. "These events all blend together after a while." Alexander's eyes lit up with amusement. "I had a feeling you might say that. What would you rather be doing right now?" Evelyn thought for a moment. "I'd love to be walking along the beach, feeling the sand between my toes and listening to the waves crash against the shore." "Then let's go," Alexander said, surprising her. "What? We can't just leave," Evelyn protested, even as excitement bubbled up inside her. Alexander leaned in close, his breath tickling her ear. "Why not? Life's too short to spend it doing things we don't enjoy." Before she could argue further, Alexander was leading her off the dance floor and towards the exit. Evelyn's mind raced with reasons why she shouldn't go, but her heart urged her forward. As they slipped out into the cool night air, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years. Alexander's car, a sleek black convertible, was waiting outside. He opened the passenger door for her, and Evelyn slid in without hesitation. As they drove through the city streets, the wind whipping through her hair, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in a long time. They reached the beach just as the moon was rising, casting a silvery glow across the water. Evelyn kicked off her heels and ran towards the waves, laughing with pure joy. Alexander followed, his own shoes discarded on the sand. They walked along the shoreline, talking and laughing as if they'd known each other for years. Evelyn learned that Alexander was a successful architect who had recently moved to the city for a big project. He shared her love of travel and distaste for the superficiality of high society. As the night wore on, they found themselves sitting on the sand, shoulders touching. Evelyn turned to look at Alexander, her heart pounding. Without a word, he leaned in and kissed her softly. It was a kiss that promised adventure, passion, and a future full of possibilities. When they finally parted, Evelyn knew her life would never be the same. She had found something real in a world of pretense, and she wasn't about to let it go. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of stolen moments and secret rendezvous. Evelyn and Alexander explored the city together, finding joy in the simplest things: a hidden bookstore, a quaint cafe, a rooftop garden with a breathtaking view. Each day brought new discoveries, not just about the world around them, but about each other. Evelyn found herself opening up to Alexander in ways she never had with anyone else. She shared her dreams of becoming a writer, a passion she'd kept hidden from her family who expected her to follow in her father's footsteps. Alexander listened without judgment, encouraging her to pursue her ambitions. In turn, Alexander revealed his own struggles with the expectations placed upon him. As the son of a renowned architect, he felt constant pressure to live up to his father's legacy. With Evelyn, he could be himself without pretense or fear of disappointment. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, but it wasn't without its challenges. Evelyn's parents, particularly her father, were less than thrilled about her involvement with Alexander. They saw him as a distraction from the path they had carefully laid out for her. "He's not from our world, Evelyn," her father had said during a particularly heated argument. "He can't provide the kind of life you're accustomed to." But Evelyn stood her ground. "The life I'm accustomed to isn't the life I want, Dad. Alexander makes me happy in a way I never thought possible." Despite the opposition, Evelyn and Alexander's love continued to grow. They found strength in each other, facing the world together with unwavering determination. One evening, as they sat on the beach where their journey had begun, Alexander turned to Evelyn with a serious expression. "I have something to tell you," he said, his voice tinged with nervousness. Evelyn's heart raced, fear and excitement warring within her. "What is it?" Alexander took a deep breath. "I've been offered a job in Paris. It's a huge opportunity, the chance to design a groundbreaking sustainable building. But it would mean leaving for at least a year." Evelyn felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. The thought of Alexander leaving was almost unbearable, but she knew how much this opportunity meant to him. That's wonderful, Alexander," she managed to say, forcing a smile. "You have to take it." Alexander studied her face intently. "I want you to come with me," he said softly. Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise. "To Paris? But what about my family, my life here?" "I know it's a lot to ask," Alexander said, taking her hands in his. "But I can't imagine doing this without you. We could start fresh, away from the expectations and pressures. You could write, I could design, and we could build a life together on our own terms." The proposition was both thrilling and terrifying. Evelyn's mind raced with all the reasons why she shouldn't go, her family's disapproval, the comfort of the familiar, the fear of the unknown. But as she looked into Alexander's eyes, filled with love and hope, she knew her decision was already made. "Yes," she whispered, her voice growing stronger. "Yes, I'll go with you." Alexander's face lit up with joy, and he pulled her into a passionate kiss. As they embraced under the starry sky, Evelyn felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, with Alexander, ready to face whatever adventures lay ahead. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity as they prepared for their move. Evelyn's parents were predictably upset, her father threatening to cut her off financially if she went through with this foolish plan. But Evelyn stood firm, buoyed by Alexander's unwavering support and her own newfound courage. As their departure date approached, Evelyn found herself filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She'd never lived outside her hometown, let alone in a foreign country. The night before they were set to leave, doubt began to creep in. "Are we crazy for doing this?" she asked Alexander as they lay in bed, limbs intertwined. Alexander propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with a tender expression. "Maybe," he admitted with a soft chuckle, "but sometimes the craziest decisions lead to the most beautiful outcomes. I love you, Evelyn, and I believe in us. Whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together." His words soothed her fears, and Evelyn snuggled closer, feeling safe and loved in his arms. As she drifted off to sleep, she knew that no matter what happened, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The flight to Paris was long, but Evelyn barely noticed the hours passing. Her mind was too full of dreams and plans for their new life. As the plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport, she felt a surge of excitement mixed with a twinge of homesickness. Their first few weeks in Paris were a whirlwind of new experiences. They settled into a charming apartment in the Marais district, with wrought iron balconies and a view of the bustling streets below. Evelyn fell in love with the city immediately. The architecture, the food, the art, the very air seemed to pulse with creativity and possibility. Alexander threw himself into his work, coming home each day with eyes bright with enthusiasm as he shared the progress on his sustainable building project. Evelyn, true to her promise to herself, began to write in earnest. She found inspiration everywhere, in the old man who ran the boulangerie downstairs, in the young lovers stealing kisses by the Seine, in the very pulse of the city itself. But as the initial excitement of their move began to fade, reality set in. The language barrier proved more challenging than Evelyn had anticipated, and she often felt isolated when Alexander was at work. The time difference made it difficult to keep in touch with friends and family back home, and she found herself missing the familiar comforts of her old life. One particularly difficult day, after a frustrating attempt to open a bank account that ended in tears of frustration, Evelyn found herself questioning their decision. When Alexander came home that evening, he found her curled up on the couch, eyes red from crying. "Evelyn, what's wrong?" he asked, immediately rushing to her side. She poured out all her fears and doubts, her struggle with the language, her loneliness, her worry that she was holding him back from fully embracing this opportunity. Alexander listened patiently, holding her close. When she finished, he cupped her face gently in his hands. "Evelyn, my love, I'm so sorry you've been feeling this way. I've been so caught up in the excitement of the project that I didn't realize how hard this has been for you. But please, never think for a moment that you're holding me back. You're the reason I have the courage to be here, to take on this challenge. We're in this together, remember?" His words were like a balm to her wounded spirit. They spent the rest of the evening making plans. Alexander would help her find a French tutor. They'd make an effort to meet their neighbours, and they'd set aside time each week to explore the city together. As the months passed, Evelyn found her footing. Her French improved, and with it her confidence. She made friends with other expats and locals alike, and her writing flourished. She even started a blog, chronicling their adventures in Paris, which gained a modest but dedicated following. Alexander's project was progressing well, earning accolades from his peers and attention from international architectural magazines. But more importantly, their relationship deepened, strengthened by the challenges they'd overcome together. 1 year turned into 2, and Paris began to feel like home. Evelyn's parents, seeing how happy and successful she was, gradually came around. They even visited for Christmas, and Evelyn felt a surge of pride as she showed them around the city she'd grown to love. It was on a crisp autumn evening, as they strolled hand in hand through the Jardin des Tuileries, that Alexander suddenly dropped to one knee. Evelyn's heart leapt into her throat as he pulled out a small velvet box. "Evelyn," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "you took a leap of faith with me 2 years ago, leaving behind everything you knew for an uncertain future. You've been my partner, my support, my inspiration through it all. I can't imagine spending a single day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy streaming down her face, Evelyn nodded emphatically. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Alexander slipped the ring, a vintage Art Deco piece they'd admired in a little antique shop months ago, onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a passionate kiss. As they embraced, with the Eiffel Tower twinkling in the distance, Evelyn marvelled at how far they'd come. Their wedding was a beautiful blend of Parisian elegance and personal touches. They exchanged vows in a small, centuries-old chapel, surrounded by their closest friends and family. Evelyn's father, who had once been so opposed to their relationship, gave a heartfelt toast at the reception, admitting that he'd never seen his daughter so happy and thanking Alexander for being the man she deserved. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Evelyn looked up at Alexander, her heart full of love. "Did you ever imagine that night at the ball, that we'd end up here?" she asked. Alexander smiled, pulling her closer. "I knew from the moment I saw you that my life would never be the same. You've exceeded every dream I ever had, Evelyn, and this is just the beginning." In the years that followed, Evelyn and Alexander's love continued to grow and evolve. They faced challenges: the stress of Alexander's increasingly high-profile career, the heartbreak of a miscarriage, the difficult decision of whether to stay in Paris or return to the States. But through it all, they remained each other's steadfast supporters and best friends. Evelyn's writing career took off, with her debut novel, a love story inspired by their own, becoming an international bestseller. Alexander's sustainable building designs revolutionized the industry, earning him prestigious awards and speaking engagements around the world. They traveled extensively, collecting experiences and memories like precious gems. They climbed Machu Picchu at sunrise, sailed the Greek islands, went on safari in Tanzania. Each adventure brought them closer, deepening their understanding of each other and the world. When they finally welcomed their daughter, Sophia, into the world, it felt like the culmination of everything they'd been through together. As they stood over her crib, marveling at the tiny life they'd created, Evelyn felt a sense of completeness she'd never known before. "She has your eyes," Alexander whispered, wrapping an arm around Evelyn's waist. "And your smile," Evelyn replied, leaning into him. "She's perfect." As Sophia grew, so did their family. They welcomed a son, Lucas, 2 years later, and their home became a bustling, joyful place filled with laughter and love. They decided to split their time between Paris and New York, wanting their children to experience both cultures. Through it all, Evelyn and Alexander never lost sight of what had brought them together: their shared sense of adventure, their ability to find joy in the simplest moments, and their unwavering belief in each other. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they returned to the beach where it all began. As they walked along the shoreline, hands clasped tightly, Evelyn marvelled at the journey they'd taken together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't left that party together?" she asked, looking up at Alexander. He smiled, the same smile that had captured her heart all those years ago. "Sometimes. But then I realise it doesn't matter. We were meant to find each other, Evelyn, in this life or any other." As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold, Evelyn and Alexander shared a kiss that held all the passion, tenderness, and love of their years together. It was a testament to the enduring power of true love, of taking risks, and of building a life on one's own terms. Their story wasn't always easy or perfect, but it was theirs. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms with the sound of the waves crashing around them, they knew that they wouldn't have changed a single moment of it, for in each other they had found not just a partner, but a home, a love that transcended time and distance, that had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, a love that continued to grow and evolve with each passing day. As they walked back along the beach, fingers intertwined, Evelyn and Alexander looked forward. As they walked back along the beach, fingers intertwined, Evelyn and Alexander looked forward to the next chapter of their lives together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, mirroring the warmth they felt in their hearts. "You know," Alexander said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never imagined that night at the ball would lead us here." Evelyn smiled, squeezing his hand. "Neither did I, but I'm so grateful it did." As they approached their beachfront cottage, a quaint little place they had rented for their anniversary getaway, Evelyn's mind wandered to the journey that had brought them to this moment, the challenges they had faced, the obstacles they had overcome, and the love that had only grown stronger with each passing year. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, noticing the pensive look on her face. "Just everything," Evelyn replied. "How far we've come, how much we've grown together. Remember when we first moved to Paris?" Alexander chuckled. "How could I forget? You were so frustrated with the language barrier, and I was drowning in work. But we made it through." "We did," Evelyn agreed. "And look at us now. 2 best-selling novels under my belt, your sustainable architecture firm thriving. It's more than I ever dreamed of." As they reached the cottage, Alexander pulled Evelyn close, wrapping his arms around her waist. "And the best part, we did it all together." Evelyn leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. It was a rhythm she had come to know as well as her own, a constant reminder of the love they shared. "I have a surprise for you," Alexander whispered, his breath warm against her ear. Evelyn pulled back slightly, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, what kind of surprise?" Alexander's eyes twinkled with mischief. "If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? Come on." He led her into the cottage, guiding her through the cozy living room and out onto the back porch. There, set up on the wooden deck overlooking the ocean, was a small table adorned with candles and a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. "Alexander," Evelyn gasped, taking in the romantic scene before her. "When did you do all this?" He grinned, pulling out a chair for her. "I may have enlisted some help from the cottage owners while we were on our walk. I wanted to make tonight special." As they sat down, Alexander poured 2 glasses of champagne, handing one to Evelyn. He raised his glass, his eyes never leaving hers. "To us, my love, to 20 years of adventure, laughter and love, and to many more to come." Evelyn clinked her glass against his, feeling a swell of emotion in her chest. "To us," she echoed softly. As they sipped their champagne, Evelyn couldn't help but marvel at how, even after all these years, Alexander could still surprise her, still make her heart race with a simple gesture. It was one of the many reasons she had fallen in love with him, and one of the countless reasons she fell in love with him anew each day. "You know," Alexander said, setting down his glass, "I've been thinking a lot about our journey lately, about all the twists and turns that led us here." Evelyn nodded, encouraging him to continue. "Do you remember that night in Paris when you were feeling so homesick and overwhelmed?" he asked. Evelyn's mind flashed back to that moment, the memory still vivid after all these years. "Of course I was ready to give up, to go back home, but you—" "I told you that we were in this together," Alexander finished, "that no matter what challenges we faced, we'd face them as a team." "And we have," Evelyn said softly, reaching across the table to take his hand. Alexander squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "We have. And Evelyn, I want you to know that I meant every word then. And I mean them even more now. You're not just my wife, you're my partner, my best friend, my soulmate." Evelyn felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. Even after 2 decades together, Alexander's words still had the power to move her deeply. "I love you, Evelyn," Alexander continued, his voice thick with emotion, "more than I ever thought possible. And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much." With that, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as he opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "Alexander," she whispered, her free hand flying to her mouth. He smiled, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Evelyn, 20 years ago, you took a leap of faith with me. You left behind everything you knew for an uncertain future. And every day since then, you've chosen to love me, to stand by me, to build a life with me. So today I'm asking you to take another leap. Evelyn, my love, my heart, will you marry me? Again?" Evelyn felt her heart swell with an overwhelming rush of love and joy. Without hesitation, she nodded, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "Yes," she managed to choke out. "Yes, Alexander, 1,000 times yes." Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger right above her original wedding band. It fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant to be there. He stood up, pulling Evelyn to her feet and into his arms. As they embraced, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore providing a soothing backdrop, Evelyn marvelled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first dance at the ball to their impulsive move to Paris, through the challenges and triumphs, the laughter and tears, they had weathered it all together. And now, here they were, 20 years later, still just as in love, still choosing each other every day. As Alexander's lips met hers in a tender kiss, Evelyn knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of their next great adventure. The kiss deepened, filled with the passion and tenderness that had only grown stronger over the years. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against Evelyn's. "I have one more surprise," he murmured, a playful glint in his eyes. Evelyn laughed softly. "Another one." "Alexander, you're spoiling me." He grinned, taking her hand and leading her back into the cottage. "That's the plan, my love." As they entered the living room, Alexander reached for his phone and pressed a button. Soft, romantic music began to play, filling the air with a melody that instantly transported Evelyn back to that first night at the ball. "May I have this dance?" Alexander asked, extending his hand with a flourish. Evelyn placed her hand in his, allowing him to pull her close. As they began to sway to the music, she was struck by how familiar and yet how thrilling it still felt to be in his arms. "Do you remember the first time we danced together?" Alexander asked, his voice low and intimate. Evelyn nodded, her cheek resting against his chest. "How could I forget? You swept me off my feet, quite literally." Alexander chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I knew from that first moment that you were special, Evelyn, that there was something between us that I'd never felt before." As they moved together, lost in the music and in each other, Evelyn reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The early days in Paris, full of excitement and uncertainty, the challenges they'd faced as they built their careers and their life together, the joy of becoming parents, and the way their love had only deepened with each passing year. "You know," Evelyn said, lifting her head to meet Alexander's gaze, "when I agreed to go to Paris with you all those years ago, I was terrified. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew I wanted to face it with you." Alexander's arms tightened around her. "And now?" Evelyn smiled, her eyes shining with love and certainty. "Now I'm not afraid at all, because I know that no matter what life throws our way, we'll face it together, just like we always have." As the music swelled around them, Alexander dipped Evelyn low, just as he had during their first dance. When he pulled her back up, their faces were inches apart, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "I love you, Evelyn," Alexander whispered, his voice filled with emotion, more than words can express. "I love you too, Alexander," Evelyn replied, her heart overflowing with joy and gratitude, always and forever. Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a perfect reflection of their enduring love. As they continued to dance, lost in their own world, Evelyn knew that this was just the beginning of their next chapter. Whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, their love a beacon guiding them through whatever storms might come. As the night wore on, Evelyn and Alexander found themselves curled up on the porch swing, a soft blanket draped over their laps. The sound of the waves provided a soothing backdrop as they gazed out at the starlit sky, content in each other's company. "You know," Evelyn said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've been thinking about writing a new book." Alexander turned to her, interest peeking in his eyes. "Oh, what's it about?" Evelyn smiled, snuggling closer to him. "Us, our story, from that first night at the ball to now, all the ups and downs, the challenges we've faced, the love that's grown between us." Alexander's arm tightened around her shoulders. "That sounds beautiful, love, but are you sure you want to share our story with the world?" Evelyn nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I do. I think our story could give hope to others, show them that true love exists, that it's worth fighting for, that even when things get tough, if you have the right person by your side, you can overcome anything." Alexander pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "You never cease to amaze me, Evelyn. Your heart, your talent. I fall in love with you all over again every day." Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. Even after all these years, Alexander still had the power to make her feel like the most special person in the world. "Speaking of amazing," Alexander continued, a hint of excitement in his voice, "I have some news of my own." Evelyn sat up slightly, turning to face him. "Oh?" Alexander nodded, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Remember that sustainable housing project we've been working on? The one aimed at providing affordable, eco-friendly homes in developing areas?" "Of course," Evelyn replied. It had been Alexander's passion project for the past year, something he'd poured his heart and soul into. "Well," he said, barely containing his excitement, "we got the green light. Full funding. We're going to be able to build not just in one location, but in 3 different countries." Evelyn's face lit up with joy. "Oh, Alexander, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you." She threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. As she pulled back, she saw the emotion in his eyes, the pride and the gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Evelyn," he said softly. "Your support, your encouragement, it means everything to me." Evelyn cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs gently stroking his cheeks. "We're a team, remember? Your dreams are my dreams. Your successes are my successes." As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Evelyn marvelled at how far they'd come. From two young people taking a chance on love to a couple who had built a life, a family, and careers they were passionate about. And through it all, their love had only grown stronger. "You know," Alexander said, his voice thoughtful, "I was thinking, with this new project, we'll be travelling a lot. Different countries, new cultures." Evelyn nodded, wondering where he was going with this. "Well," he continued, a smile playing on his lips, "I was thinking, why don't we make it an adventure? Travel the world together, just like we've always dreamed of doing." Evelyn's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? But what about the kids, our home?" Alexander chuckled. "The kids are grown now, love. Sophie's starting her residency, and Lucas is off backpacking through South America. And as for our home, well, home is wherever we're together, isn't it?" Evelyn felt a thrill of excitement run through her. The idea of travelling the world with Alexander, experiencing new cultures, helping people, and creating sustainable homes. It was like a dream come true. "So what do you say, Evelyn?" Alexander asked, his eyes twinkling with adventure. "Are you ready for our next great journey?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to Alexander's lips before pulling back with a radiant smile. "With you, always." As they sat there, planning their next adventure, Evelyn felt a sense of anticipation and joy that reminded her of that night so many years ago when she'd agreed to go to Paris with Alexander. Once again, they were stepping into the unknown together, but this time they had years of love, trust, and shared experiences behind them. Whatever the future held, Evelyn knew that as long as she had Alexander by her side, they could face anything. Their love story was far from over. In fact, it felt like they were just beginning a new chapter, and Evelyn couldn't wait to see where this next adventure would take them. As the stars twinkled above and the waves crashed against the shore, Evelyn and Alexander held each other close, their hearts full of love and excitement for the journey ahead. Their story, which had begun with a chance meeting at a ball, was about to take another thrilling turn, and they were ready to face it together, hand in hand, just as they always had.